Today I have one student presenter who is celebrating with us everything writing. Please welcome Catherine Kleinofen.
Hi, my name's Catherine. I'm a senior here, and we were told to say why we loved writing, and it's kind of hard to verbalize, but I really love it because I've always had these separate worlds and these separate people in my head that always used to entertain me whenever I was, in an upset or in a down spot, and I really wanted to write it down on paper, so maybe these characters could also lift someone's spirits or kind of relate to somebody else who was in a similar spot. All right, the title of the piece I'm reading is called Embracing the Dark. I sat impatiently in the stiff armchair of my living room, more hopeful than I had been since the beginning of my memory. Resting my head into my dampened hands, I allowed my mind to sink deep into my blackened world of worry. I jumped out of the armchair, startled when the door jolted from its frame a crack, then slowly squeaked its way fully open. The doctor came out, steps heavy, eyes focused on the ground. As his eyes met mine, they filled with tears, and my own began to fog with the dread. I knew things had gone wrong. "She's dead," the doctor said. I did everything I could. I began to sit back in the armchair, but shot upright as anger boiled through my veins, supplying strength. "Liar," I screamed at him, burning with my emotional fire. "Young lady," my father gruffly snapped. He was standing in the opposite corner of the room. The look of disappointment at my shrieked outburst sat on his face. I didn't hear a word he might have spoken after that. I was running out the door, too furious and heartbroken to face the household of hate any longer. I ran as fast as I could to the only place I could gather myself at a time like this, the seaside. I collapsed breathless on the cold, soft sand, crying harder than I ever remembered as I recall the memories suspended and protected in each white grain of sand. My father was first married to a gentle and delicate blonde named Elise. My father loved her unconditionally and was overjoyed when she first began to carry me. Unfortunately, this happiness couldn't last forever. Elise gave her life as a sacrifice for mine. She didn't last long enough to name me. Therefore, the obligation fell to my father. He named me Bethany Elise to honor his dead wife. For a long time after her death, it was just my father and me. I think he was giving himself time to heal, time to resign himself as a widower. Then, Dad's shop took a turn for the worse, and we began to lose too much money. He could no longer play the part of both the working man and the babysitter. After I turned 5, my father remarried a fiery red-haired and vibrant green-eyed singer. She was the only mother I remember. Her name was Marissa. I wasn't sure if I was going to like her at first, but when I was about to turn 6, she took me to one of the most important places in my life. Marissa introduced me to the seashore. She taught me to swim and catch fish with my bare hands. We made she-shell necklaces and crowns, then splashed into the freezing, shallow waters. Every sunset, we would sit in a nearby cave and sing while watching the last rays of the sun dance on the waves that lapped against the cave walls, keeping time with our voices. The games we played and the splash wars, the stories we told and the jokes we laughed at, each preserved in the sand and water. One day, many years later, I found myself paying very close attention to how pale her skin had faded, how thin her hair had gotten, the fogged expression in her eyes. I knew something was wrong, though her voice remained soft and comforting, just as the unfaltering smile on her face. She would never change to me, not as my father had, and I would love her just as I had my father. I shook my head fiercely, trying to clear my head of the now painful memories that each surge of water brought to my mind. I slapped the waves that mocked my broken spirit. The emotions ripping me apart on the inside brought tears to my eyes when a real voice of smiling mockery laughed from behind me. "Hello, cranky." I turned around to look at the person daring enough to rub my pain in and smiled. "Hello, Peter," I said, more at ease now to have him near. Peter was the only other person besides my mother who could give me the illusion of happiness at a time like this. He was my best friend since childhood. Tilting his sandy-haired head to the side, he studied me intensely with his hazel eyes. "What's all the tears for?" Instantly, the magic he cast on me shattered, and my smile faded, leaving the tears to arise once more. I looked out towards the sun, now sinking into the ocean, and forced my voice to erupt out of my clogged throat. She's dead. My mother's gone. Peter came forward and spoke in a sympathetic whisper. I'm so sorry. I looked to his face and allowed his sympathy to calm my nerves rather than aggravating them. He sat down on the shore by my side, leaving a small space between us, but comfortingly placed his arm around my shoulders. After some time, he spoke. You know, you and your mother looked nothing alike. I laughed because it couldn't be more correct. I was almost the complete opposite of her. My skin was darker due to the extensive amount of time I spent outdoors. I had blonde hair and ice blue eyes. I was also very skinny. Peter used to joke that I'd snap in half if I fell when we climbed trees. Besides our physical looks, even our voices were different. My voice was quiet and deep for a girl, the reason for my usual silent behavior. But through our differences, we had two similar characteristics. The first was our lips, their pink rose shine, decently full-looking, and just the right size for our faces. The second was our love for one another. There was no greater love than what I felt towards Marissa, and I know she felt the same. Tears welled up once again, and Peter pulled me close in his arms and held me, trying to cease the thin streams that trickled down my reddened cheeks. Peter, a hard voice broke his embrace. We looked behind us to see Peter's father, a strong blonde man, standing there. Do you know what time it is? He inquired harshly. Well, it's far later than you think, he spat out before we could respond. Now return home this instant. Peter obediently arose and looked at me. You going home? In a little while, I answered softly. He nodded. See you soon, Bethany. I gave a slight nod, then turned to look at the sunset one last time before I stood up to leave. I released a weighted sigh and began the long walk home, the place I wanted to escape more than anything. I knew there was no way to avoid it. I lifted my head strongly and began to pick up my pace. There was nothing I could do but face my future, and I was going to face it with everything I held within me.